Professor Gerzebeck, you have been active for soil your whole life. You have been involved in several institutions and in several organizations. So we are very interested to hear a little bit about your life and your work experience.
Andreas, many thanks for this great opportunity to record some of my life, of my professional life. I was born in Vienna in Austria in 1961, so I am Austrian, and my ancestors came from Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, Italy, Poland and Romania, so typically Austrian and a typically Viennese. The family itself lived in Vienna for about 200 years. My father worked in the Ministry of the Interior, where he built up radiation protection in Austria from the end of the 1950s onwards and ran the radiation and civil protection school until his retirement, training tens of thousands of police officers, firefighters and paramedics. My mother studied mathematics and did her doctorate in the geometry of numbers with Professor Lafka, who was a very, very famous mathematician. She was a pioneer in electronic data processing in the late 1950s. She trained a lot of high school teachers in the 70s in IT methods and was herself high school professor. So I'm married with Andrea. We have 4 children. I have no siblings, so I grew up as an only child, and my whole life I stayed in the 14th district of Vienna in Penzing. So my family is a typically civil servant family, so I would say middle class, and nothing special about that.
So what about your education?
After primary and secondary school, where I specialized in natural sciences, history and mathematics, I studied agriculture with a major in crop production at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna, better known as BOKU, die Bodenkultur. The master's thesis was on aluminium toxicity in maize, and the doctoral thesis, which I completed in 1987, was on the plant availability of magnesium. So first I was more in plant nutrition, and from plant nutrition I came to soil science. Of course, it's very, very related, as all of you know. Parallel to my education, I was also intensively involved in sailing trips, for instance, so maybe some 10,000 nautical miles on different oceans of the world, also in the Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, in the Ice Sea and so on and so forth. And I was also already during my studies, I was vice crew commander of the Yachting Club of Austria for Vienna, Lower Austria and Burgenland. And my second hobby was and is also hunting, so I passed my hunting license also during my studies. I grew up in a post-war world. That means as being born in '61, so World War II was not so long ago. And my teenage years in the 1970s were marked by many social processes. So the post-war period was replaced by a spirit of optimism among young people that had begun with the year 1968, of course, a very famous year. And I was thinking before this interview about the formative experiences which I had, and of course there were many, but amongst them I think one was the discussion about commissioning or shutdown of the nuclear power plant in Zwentendorf. So this was the only nuclear power plant of Austria at that time planned, and there was a large political discussion if nuclear power is safe or not, and what to do, of course, with the burned fuel and all these questions. So I, at that time, was in favor of commissioning due to my imprint at home, due to my father, who was a pioneer in radiation protection, of course. So the vote was narrowly against commissioning, and thus nuclear power never was introduced in Austria until today. When in 1986 the Chernobyl accident happened, I then quickly changed my mind and adopted a much more critical attitude towards nuclear power. Another formative event a little bit later was the, let's say, the successful demonstrations against the construction of the Danube power plant in Hamburg. So this was exactly during my study days at BOKU, and of course many of us and many students, so they were very active in these demonstrations. And I think it was a really unbelievable demonstration of civil courage of young people in Austria, and a milestone in the future activity of citizens for environmental protection in Austria. And I think this was also somehow formative for me, being, let's say, more and more critical about the impact of society on environment, and of course also on natural resources like the soil.
So how did you actually come to work in soil science and your particular specification you have now?
Yeah, I came very early in contact with soil science and soil research. Why? Already in the summer after my high school diploma, so this was 1979, I did an internship at the Institute of Agricultural Sciences at the today called Austrian Institute of Technology at Seibersdorf in Lower Austria. And then I had my military service, and during that I served another 6 months in this institute. So during this time I learned a lot. So I learned the whole routine analysis of soil analysis, plant analysis, and I made mass spectrometry with nitrogen isotopes. So this was with 18. So it was a very early start, also, let's say, with some scientific work, of course. And this was formative for me that then I decided to study agriculture. And I think this was also a great help for me, because during the first year in agricultural sciences we had the whole year chemical laboratory, for instance, and I finished the chemical laboratory before Eastern, because it was very easy for me to fulfill all these tasks which were asked for. And then, of course, I was very lucky. At the end of my diploma studies, so I was in the 8th semester, I was asked by the head of the Institute of Agriculture of the Austrian Institute of Technology, Professor Ernst Haunold, if I want to take over the management of the soil research group. So I was 23 years old at that time, and my predecessor there, he became director of the Federal Soil Research Institute, so it was Dr. Danneberg, and I followed him. Yeah. I had not finished my studies at that time, so I hesitated a little bit, but then I thought, okay, this is a unique chance to step into research. And at that time, at this specific time in the 80s, the Austrian Institute of Technology was much better equipped than all the other institutions in Austria, including the universities. So today, universities are very well equipped. Also the federal research institutions are very well equipped. But at this time, the AIT was the best equipped, scientifically equipped institution. And I said, okay, this is a very good chance for me. So I started to work I had no holidays at these times, and I had to pass 9 large exams still and to write my master thesis. And I did this within half a year and finished my study in the shortest time possible. And I was also able then to complete my doctoral studies parallel to my work at the AIT.
So what would you think of as the major influences on your development?
From the scientific point of view, I think the most important factor was the reactor accident at Chernobyl in 1986. So I was less than 2 years working for the institute at that time, and the Chernobyl accident had really a drastic influence on my further scientific career. From one day to the next, the AIT had become the center of scientific work on the effects of large-scale radioactive contamination in Austria. So we were also the advisors for the government. We even had to answer all the questions by the citizens. So I was one of 3 persons sitting there and taking the telephone the whole day, from the morning to the evening. Because when I laid down the phone, yeah, it was ringing again and ringing again and ringing again the whole day, because people were very concerned, and also they asked if they could go for a walk in the Alps, or if they could drink milk, and all these questions. So that means it was really a very formative event for me, because I stepped into radioecology, and for 15 years I was very heavily involved in radioecology. So I learned during this time that it is very important to understand processes and to ask the right questions scientifically in order to be able to establish a model. Because we needed models for prognosis. We had to calculate, for instance, the possible dose of the Austrian population, and so on and so forth. And I was included also in the experts roster of the Atomic Energy Agency at that time, and I had trips, official trips to Russia, Belarus and Ukraine, and I spoke to thousands of managers, of farm managers in these countries, giving them advice to reduce the transfer of radionuclides in the food chain. It was also very interesting because I could see the situation there, which was not very easy. So this was maybe the most formative influence. And if I think about people, of course it was Professor Haunold who engaged me to the Austrian Institute of Technology, where I stayed for 19 years. But it was also Professor Winfried Blum, because he took really care of me during my scientific career, also at IIT, and he led me to the habilitation at BOKU. And also then he was the person to advertise a new professorship at BOKU, which I was able then to get later on. And I also want to mention Professor Edward Krakhofer, specifically mention him because he brought me very early, namely in 1994, as treasurer to the executive board of the Austrian Soil Science Society. And I followed him as a president in the year 2000, and I'm still a member of the executive board now then for 27 years of the Austrian Soil Science Society. And we will come back to that a little bit later, also in relation to the IUSS.
So you have also received several awards and honorary memberships and honorary academic degrees. So with a view to your career and maybe also the highlights of your career, what would you think of being most important?
Yeah, so I spoke now specifically about AIT because this was the earlier time. But in 2001 I received the professorship in environmental toxicology at BOKU. I think this was a very important step for me. I think for me personally, this was the highest level I wanted to achieve. So full professorship at the Institute of Soil Research. This was really great for me. What I did not know was that there were several steps after that. So in 2003 I was appointed Vice Rector for Research for the university here in the Rectorate, and I held this position until 2010. And as the Rector stepped back in 2009, I also had to take over the rectorship in 2009 then, and I stayed then for 2 periods until 2018, so I was more or less 15 years in the rectorate. I think the important point was I never stopped with science and I never stopped with teaching. That means I kept all my courses. I tried also to keep a certain level of PhD students, also some master students, and I had quite large projects still. So that was very important, because I never thought that the work in administration is the end point. So I wanted to come back, and now I am back for nearly three years now, and I'm very happy to be back in pure science. And besides that, in 2019, so last year, I became president of the Christian Doppler Research Association, which is a quite important research fund in Austria, organizing the cooperative research between academic institutions and the industry. Yeah. And that's a very important thing also today, to lay the basis for future innovations. So I'm also happy to do that. I was very active in international university networks. So I was president of the Danube Rectors Conference. I founded a network of life science universities of Central Southeastern Europe, and so I was founding president for about 8 years. I was vice president of ICA, the European Association of Life Science Universities. And this is only a small fraction of what I did. And I received numerous awards. So for honorary doctorates, I received the Emil Rahmann Medal of the German Soil Science Society, honorary membership of the IUSS, of course, which I'm very proud of, the Grand Decorations of Honor in Gold for services to the Republic of Austria and for the Federal State of Lower Austria, and corresponding member of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, member of the National Academy of Science and Engineering Academic in Germany, Academia Europaea, and some other, of course, scientific societies.
So coming back to your scientific work, what would you think of to be your most outstanding or most important scientific achievements?
I already spoke a little bit about the radioecology, and there I focused specifically also on the behavior of radionuclides in semi-natural environments, so in more vulnerable environments, also in agricultural environments, that's clear. But it was very interesting, of course, to see that radionuclides in forests, in alpine pastures, for instance, they remained more mobile for a much longer time than as compared to arable soils, for instance. Yeah? And I tried to elucidate these processes. I was also heavily involved in the development of a large radioecological computer model to assess the ingestion dose response of the Austrian population, and we used that also to evaluate possible countermeasures in the case of a large-scale contamination. So as a radioecologist, I think I gained a lot of international recognition. Additionally, from 1984 on, I was always in organic matter research. I applied numerous methods for soil organic matter characterization, a lot in stable isotope techniques, but also FDIR, for instance, different humic substances characterizations, and I took also part in the developing a quite well-known method of gaining stable microaggregates by low-energy sonication treatments, which are very important for medium to long-term soil organic matter stabilization. I focused also very much on long-term experiments to elucidate processes on a longer time scale, specifically in Ultuna in Sweden, where I worked together with Professor Holger Kirchmann for decades in the meantime, and he was also guest of our Austrian Soil Science Society for some lectures. I remember that very well, and we used this unique experiment in Ultuna, which is unique because they started in 1956 to apply organic manures, but they first analyzed the organic carbon content. So they applied always 2,000 kilograms of organic carbon per year, so making different organic inputs directly comparable with respect to the recalcitrance of the organic matter. So we use this very specific setup for a lot of projects and a lot of research. More recently, then I focused on chronosequence studies here in Austria, establishing a chronosequence in the Danube floodplain in the national park here close to Vienna, which was a very interesting endeavor because we could also calculate rates of soil organic matter accumulation and so on and so forth. They even wrote a research highlight about us in Nature about this project. And since 2016 I'm very actively involved in studies of the soil resources of the Galapagos archipelago. We established a chronosequence of soils there from 1,450 years to 1.1 million years, looking at the long-term development of soils. And just now I'm writing on a paper on development of the SOC stocks in this chronosequence, which is a very, very interesting topic. Besides radionuclides, I also, with respect to contaminants, I also focused on heavy metals and organic contaminants, of course. I organized the largest research program in Austria on remediation of brownfields and landfills some years ago. I built 4 different lysimeter research plants as basic equipment to elucidate the contaminant transport in the soil plant water system. And maybe the last point which I want to mention, in 1995 I started together with the University of Vienna to develop theoretical chemical methods for soil scientific questions. So I myself was reluctant at the beginning, but Professor Hans Lischka, he was well known to me from the yachting club. And he always asked me, why do you make only laboratory experiments? Yeah, it's today this is much better to calculate everything. And at first I was really not very keen to start with that, but then it turned out that this was a very, very good influence, and together with Hans Lischka we started this topic, and today I think we are one of the groups worldwide in molecular modeling of soil processes on an atomistic and molecular level, and I think this is also another very important topic in my scientific life. Here we focus now specifically on the interaction of soil organic matter with mineral surfaces on the one hand, and organic contaminants with soil organic matter and mineral surfaces and microaggregates. So that's a hot topic, of course, until today. Maybe I should also tell a little bit about the IUSS and the positions held there. So, as I already said, since 1994 I'm in the executive board of the Austrian Soil Science Society, and already in 1998 I represented the Austrian Society in the Council of IUSS at Montpellier. And from then on I was very frequently in the council meetings, also last year, representing the Austrian Soil Science Society. So I had a very early contact with IUSS, so I started to attend all the World Congresses in 1990. And in 2006 I was appointed then Vice Chair of the Soil Chemistry Commission. In 2010 I was appointed Chair, and from 2014 to 18 I was Chairperson of the Soil Properties and Processes Division. So 12 years scientific officer of the IUSS, and I really enjoyed working for the IUSS in this international spirit, and I got so many friends there, and so many colleagues with whom I can interact today, and I hope also in the future.
So, summing up your experiences with science and soil, what are your ideas of the future of soil science, but also of soil in particular?
I think what we have seen in the last 30 years in soil science was a tremendous shift. We had soil science was before very much on the one hand a descriptive science. So we described soils, geographically distributions, and so on and so forth, and the basis for agricultural production and also, of course, forestry. So this was the main aim, let's say 100 years ago. And then today soil science has completely changed, because all these advanced methods, so I spoke about theoretical chemistry, but we also have the accelerator methods, we have all the different methods in nano sciences which are today available for soil science. So we are now a real basic science. A basic science which specializes more and more. So I think today, also with the methods of molecular biology, we opened a lot of new doors for understanding of soil processes. I think what we should be careful about is that we also in the future we see the soil as a complete system. So not to take apart everything into smaller and smaller slices, but try really to integrate this vast knowledge which we have now in order to be able to understand the soil as part of the ecosystem better. Yeah. So this would also be my plea, not to forget about the system as a whole when digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And I might mention Walter Kubiena also here, because Walter Kubiena was teaching here exactly at this institute, and he is founder, more or less the founder of micromorphology, and I'm also very fond of micromorphology. Therefore I brought my microscope for this interview here, because I like also to look into thin sections. He said at that time, if you just look into the soil as let's say a chemical system, yeah, then you break down everything and then you find which elements are contained in the soil. And if you look at the soil as a whole, like for instance trying to do that in micromorphology, then you try to look into the functions and the processes, to see the processes. My hope for the future is that humanity will stand together in solidarity and prioritize and support the sustainable use of land resources worldwide. And I'm very happy that the European Commission just now started to develop a new European soil strategy. And I think we need that for the whole world. We need a soil strategy for the whole world in order to secure the basis of humankind. So that's my message also for the future generations.
Martin, thank you very much for this interview and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much for this great opportunity.